Hello and welcome to Earth Science 1000C. This class is offered in a variety of formats: live, live online, and online. This lecture series is designed to go with my Christopher Nickel, professor, live and live online classes. It's also to be used as a tutorial for the online classes, but the online classes are standard and developed by committee, so I cannot guarantee that the tests come directly from these lectures. So I'm recommending that you use this as a tutorial for major concepts and not your sole source of information. So welcome to Earth Science. We will start the program with talking about how we measure things, because in science we do a lot of measuring. The world uses an international system of units called the SI, informally referred to as the metric system. The United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom have not adopted the metric system as their standard units, although scientists in these countries do use the metric system. In this class, we'll be using a variety of units. When we get to weather, we'll be using more Fahrenheit, miles per hour for wind speed, but we'll also be using knots, which are nautical miles per hour. So there's a lot of different units that we'll be using throughout this class. With each unit, we'll describe where it comes from and why we use it. The metric system is based on what we call base units. All other units are derived from these base units. The one unit with a prefix is the kilogram, which is the standard unit of mass. The gram is the basic unit, and a kilogram is 1,000 grams. We'll be using meters as the SI base unit for length, the kilogram for mass, second for time. We won't really be covering electricity, but the amp is electricity. We'll be looking at all of the different temperatures in this class because we may be discussing kelvins when we talk about astronomy. We may be discussing Fahrenheit when we talk about weather. And we may be discussing Celsius when we're looking at specific heats of water and stuff. Mole is chemistry, and candela is physics, and we won't be using those. We will be using area, volume, when we look at maps, area, volume, speed and velocity, acceleration, not too much, frequency, when we talk about the wavelengths of light, density, yes. So some of these units will be applicable to this class. Others we won't use. In the metric system, you have a base and a prefix, and the prefix tells you what factor. For instance, when I said a kilogram is 1,000 grams, that's 10 to the third power grams. So you can see in this illustration, the kilo is 10 to the 3. It's very easy to move within the metric system because all you're doing is adding or taking away zeros, essentially moving the decimal place left or right. So when you want to move from deca to deci, for instance, you move the decimal place 2 times to the right, the D for deca, the B basic, D deci. So basically you're just moving the decimal place to the right or the left. Science. Most science classes, and I sit through science meetings all the time, so scientists love science. Science is an ever-changing body of knowledge, really. It's not a noun, it's not a verb. It can be both. It's always changing, and you need to change with new discoveries. It's always testing your scientific knowledge and altering it. And it does influence society technology. So basically, we test our observations to discover the natural world. So science is a body of knowledge that's been tested based on observations, and then we use that to increase our understanding or problem solving. The process is called scientific method. Everyone's been familiar with the scientific method steps. Problem observations go hand in hand. You observe something and it spurns a question. Then you form your hypothesis, what you think the answer is. You test the hypothesis using the experiment. That experiment collects data. You analyze it. You draw your conclusions. And either you have to change your hypothesis because it's incorrect, or you communicate the results when your hypothesis is tested. So observation is the hallmark of science. When you look at observation, everyone sees things differently. The illustration to the right, the arrows, they, to the naked eye at first glance, look like they're different lengths. But if you measure it and collect data, you would see that they're all the same length, but you observe them differently. So that illustration is to show you that you need to measure your observations. The illustration below is both an old lady and a young lady. It's one of those pictures where if you look at it long enough, you can see two different pictures. Others you can see more, but you see two different pictures, an older lady or a young lady, designed to show you that you can't base your opinion solely on observation, that you need to test your data for it to be valid. So your hypothesis is usually an if-then statement, and it has to be clear and testable. It's what you believe the outcome will be. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong at this point. It's just based on your observations. Then the experiment takes place. That's how you test your hypothesis. It's called a controlled experiment because you have a control group. And then you have an experimental group. The experimental group contains what you're testing. What you're testing is called a variable. A variable means it changes. So you're testing a variable. Your outcome changes as well, so it's variable. So each variable has its name. The experimental group is called the independent variable. The outcome is called a dependent variable. Variable just means it changes. You're only allowed to test one changing variable. So the control group is designed to give you that baseline. The dependent variable is the results. The independent variable is what you're testing. Then you analyze your data. You decide whether or not it supports your hypothesis. So remember, independent variables, what you're testing, one per experiment. Dependent variables, what you're measuring. It changes when you change the dependent variable. When you collect data, use your direct observations. And you record them. That's the first aspect in collecting data. Measuring. Measuring is called quantitative data. That's the second aspect of data collecting. Samples. Samples. You use as large a sample as you can to represent the population. And that is a combination of measuring, but you can't measure everything, so you get as large a set as you can, and then you extrapolate that to the entire population or expand it to the entire population. And then analysis uses charts, tables, and graphs on the data that you've collected. It organizes it and allows you to make your decision. Then your conclusions are either models. An example of a model would be the layers of the Earth. We have never cut the planet in half, so we don't know that the core is solid, surrounded by liquid, outer core, made of iron and nickel, but based on measurements and experimentation, we use data to form what we believe, an inference, and then we create a model to explain it. After it's been tested time and time again, and it's accepted by the scientific community, it's considered a theory. Now, it's not necessarily accepted as fact because, like I said in the opening, with science, when presented with new data, you change your theory. So it's not a law, it's not fact, it's a theory that's always being added to and altered based on new evidence. So no experiment's a failure, even if it proves you wrong. You eliminated possibilities and expanded what you know. So experiments are observations of real events. Lastly, results are communicated. Science use peer-reviewed papers. And then it helps spread knowledge, and people see if the results are repeatable or not, because repeatable is an important process. So theories, like I said, they're explanations, they're based on experimentation, they're generally accepted by the scientific community, they're always changing, so they're not fact, they're not law, they can't be totally proven, you cannot cut the Earth in half, you cannot get a picture of the Milky Way galaxy because we can't travel out of the Milky Way and get a picture of it, so those are models used to explain theories. Laws, on the other hand, are basic equations that have a definite result. The laws of motion, clear, measurable, mathematically computed. No exceptions to laws. They're measurable and have solutions, and they're not the same as theories. So in science, we're attempting to learn more about the world and add to scientific knowledge. It involves experimentation, observations, questions, research. We expand technology and use technology in science. And when we get new technology, science grows. So technology is the application of science to meet the needs of society.